The cold wind scraped across the plains like a hungry animal, dragging dust and sorrow behind it as the sun ducked low, staining the sky a bruised red. And in that harsh, dying light, the old Apache woman appeared on the cowboy's land, leaning heavily on a stick carved from mesquite wood, her 2 daughters, walking behind her, exhausted. Shadows against the horizon, while the tall cowboy named Cade Mallory stood on his porch, his hat tipping low as he watched them approach with paced steps full of fear, dignity, and the quiet fire of people who had suffered more than words could carry. He had heard rumors days earlier, Apache camps burned by renegade posses, settlers driven by hatred more than survival, women and children turned into prey for men who no longer remembered what it meant to be human. And now the evidence of that cruelty limped toward him in human form, 3 souls wrapped in dust and desperation. Cade had lived long enough to understand that some things were bigger than the rules written by frightened men in far-off towns. Yet even he felt the weight as the old woman lifted her face, lined like the canyons and carved by years that held both violence and wisdom, and in a voice roughened by smoke. "Grief and miles traveled," she said. "No one gives us shelter. But maybe you will, cowboy." And something in Cade's chest tightened because her gaze did not plead, it judged, expecting him to choose what kind of man he truly was. Behind her, the daughters stood silent. The elder, Taya, near-grown, fierce-eyed despite the trembling in her limbs. The younger, Loma, barely 15, clutching a blanket to her like it was the last piece of her home. Cade scratched his jaw, torn between the lawless cruelty of the land and the fading morality that still anchored him to the ghost of a promise he once made to his mother, that he would never let fear turn him into a coward. And so he stepped down from the porch, boots thudding against the dusty boards, and said, "As long as you're here, nobody touches you," though he knew the moment the words left his mouth that the choice would bring trouble like storm, clouds forming over desert mountains. The old woman's silent nod carried the weight of both gratitude and resignation. She knew accepting shelter could bring death to Cade as easily as safety to her daughters, but she also knew men like him were rare, and rare things in the West often died first. Cade led them inside, letting the warmth of his small ranch house wrap around them, and as the daughters drank water with shaking hands and the old woman lowered herself slowly onto a stool by the fire, she began to speak, telling Cade of the men who rode through their camp, men wearing outlaw grins and carrying torches, men who believed destruction was its own kind of power. They took the lives of her sons. They destroyed her family's horses. They burned their food and their memories until only smoke and screams remained. And as she spoke, Cade realized those outlaws weren't DT strangers. He had faced them once years back, in a gambling town where law meant nothing and cruelty meant everything. And he knew they were the kind of men who never left unfinished business behind. Night fell heavy outside, pressing against the walls like a beast trying to sniff its way in, and Cade found himself glancing at the window as if expecting danger to have tracked them. Already, while the old Apache woman whispered chants in a language older than memory, her daughters huddled in the corner beside a rifle, Cade placed there just in case, though their hands shook too much to hold it steady. As the fire crackled and shadows danced across the room like restless spirits, Cade made a silent vow that no one, not outlaws, not fearful settlers, not even the lawless West itself, would drive those 3 women from his protection. But he also sensed that by sunrise the storm, destined to fall upon his ranch, would no longer be a distant threat. It would ride fast, ride hard, and ride with vengeance because evil men possessed one terrible skill. They never stopped hunting the weak, especially when kindness got in their way.